good evening, and perhaps I should say welcome to Sussex. It's a great pleasure to share this with you. I'm very big supporter of Sussex. I've lived here more or less all my life, and we're going to have a little wander around Sussex this evening, and I'm going to show you some examples of what's rare in Sussex. I've got a little map here in case you don't know quite where Sussex is. We're in the red dashed box roughly, and my apologies to those of you who are in the further north. I couldn't get the whole of the map on, but my wife is from a Yorkshire family, and what she is concerned about that's rare in Sussex is this particular dish, which is potted beef. It's almost impossible to get here, but when she's in Yorkshire, it's something that she can't resist. But perhaps we should move on to some plants. And I was trying to think of a species that was rare in Sussex, particularly rare in Sussex, and this is Silene conica, the sand catchfly, which has only one site. It's been known there for more than 100 years, and it's not the only dunes in Sussex, but it's the only site for sand catchfly, which is a coastal species, though it does occur occasionally inland on sand. I think you could say its headquarters was probably in East Anglia. But that's only down the road from me, well, over the downs from me, Climping Dunes, which are by Littlehampton. So I thought that it would be quite a good idea to give you some idea of where Sussex is. We've got neighbouring Hampshire to the west, and to the north, Surrey, and then over to the east, Kent. And perhaps the most important feature of Sussex is the long coastline. And along that coastline, we have two main dune systems. We've got them at East Head, which is at the entrance to Chichester Harbour. And just inside East Head is Pilsey Island, which is another good dune system. And right over at the other end of the county, practically in Kent, we've got Camber Sands. They're the two biggest areas of dunes, but the sands catchfly here by Littlehampton at Climping Dunes. Climping Dunes they've got a smaller arrow indicating they're not as large as the other two. Let's have a little visit to Climping Dunes. And the first thing you notice when you visit in summer is the prevalence of this non-native species, the hare's tail grass. It's very well established there, and strangely enough, it's moving westwards along the dunes, which is against the prevailing wind. But we do have native species there. We have one of the most beautiful of the dune species, the sea bindweed, in profusion there. And this much smaller little beauty, sand cat's tail, which is there in not quite such plenty as the sea bindweed, but they're very. It's a good site to visit if you're in Sussex, just by Littlehampton. If we then move westwards to the mouth of Chichester Harbour, we have East Head, which is looked after extremely well by the National Trust. These are much more extensive dunes. You can see all the marram there, and there are some particularly good examples of foredunes there, with some of our rarities like frosted orach. A very uncommon Sussex plant. The sea rocket is more scattered along the Sussex coast, but perhaps the rarest of the three there, you might be able to make out Salsolacale, prickly saltbush wort. All these plants of the four dunes tend to move about as the sand is blown about from year to year, and they crop up in slightly different places. But the four dunes at East Head are particularly well developed. Moving in, I've got a closer view there of Atriplex laciniata, frosted arach, and I'm sure that there are some of you sitting in your homes who would like to update me on some of the botanical names I'm giving. I think it's still Atriplex laciniata. Polygona maritimum, sea knotgrass. This it doesn't necessarily turn up every year. Strangely, just about a quarter of a mile across the mouth of Chichester Harbour in Hampshire, on Hayling Island, it's been known there for years, constantly, but it only occasionally turns up in Sussex. And the photograph, which quite close in, shows the way that the leaves are rolled back on the underside, which is quite a good ID character for this plant. It's very rare in Sussex. It used to occur at Brighton Marina, but I think it's gone from there, and I haven't seen it actually at East Head for a while. Now, East Head also has dune slacks. When I first knew East Head in the 1970s, these had not developed, and they were just flat areas of slightly damp sand. We now have the long-bracted sedge, which I think is one of the most attractive of our native sedges. This occurs at East Head, but it's a very rare Sussex plant. There are only 3 or 4 sites across the county, and it's, as I say, it's colonised the dune slacks, which have been forming their own vegetation and are going on, obviously evolving. One of the first colonizers was strawberry clover. And when, I think it was in the 1990s, I was on a BSBI field meeting with the great Francis Rose. And I think we found strawberry clover, but there was virtually nothing else. And he looked around the dune slacks, which were more or less bare, and he said, these are going to get their own vegetation going in due course. And I'm sure that in a few years' time, we will have marsh helleborines here. Well, I thought, well, I'm not very confident about that, I thought, but they've arrived, and last year there were over 400 flowering spikes. The SBRS, the Sussex Botanical Recording Society, here we are, visited in 2024, and there we are in the dune slacks, which are by no means bare anymore, and you can see a few spikes scattered around there in the foreground. But as I said, more than 400 flowering plants, and it was the first West Sussex record since 1973. There's another view of East Head because it encloses a nice salt marsh area. You'll see the Spartina there, and you're looking inland to the rather dim outline of the Downs. This whole salt marsh area is very well worth a look. It has these 2 sea lavenders, Vulgarian humule, and the hybrid between the 2, which is pretty easy to spot. That's common sea lavender, the lax-flowered sea lavender, and the hybrid. The damper salt marsh is good for the glassworts, and I've listed the ones there. They're obviously rather tricky, but they are slightly easier to identify late autumn when the colours develop, because they do that they do take on different colours late in the season. So there are 4 salicornias plus the perennial sarcocornia. It's one of the best salt marshes in Sussex, but the RSPB, very close by at Medmenary, has created a new area of salt marsh when there's been a coastal retreat. And obviously it's good for the birds, but it's good for the plants as well. All the rivers in Sussex have small areas of salt marsh. There's some by the Cuckmere, which is a river that flows through the east of the county, and we'll see some further pictures of Cuckmere. There's just a picture of the sea blight and the sea aster. The commonest glasswort in Sussex is purple glasswort, and there we are right at the eastern end of Sussex at the Rye Harbour Nature Reserve, where there is plenty of purple glasswort, and it does go this glorious colour in good years. Much rarer salt marsh plant is the Chenopodium chenopodioides, the salt marsh goosefoot, which occurs at Rye Harbour. In fact, it's the best place in Sussex to see it. It does occur in the west end of the county at the RSPB reserve, which I mentioned at Medmenary, but very sparingly and not every year. What we've got a lot of in Sussex is vegetated shingle. We've got a lot of shingle, and we've got a lot of areas where there is little trampling and the vegetation can develop. And there, of course, we find the yellow-horned poppy, which is one of our magnificent flowers of this habitat. You'll see if you go to Brighton that the vegetation, some of the stretches along the promenade, the vegetation doesn't get much of a chance, but just this side of Brighton Beach at Shoreham, there's plenty of good vegetated shingle, and its speciality is the starry clover, which is established here, I think, as its sole station in the British Isles, and it's been known at Shoreham since 1806. It's not considered native. The theory is that it possibly came over in ship's ballast, but it's well established. It has popped up elsewhere in the British Isles, and Francis Rose did actually find it somewhere near Portsmouth. I'm not sure whether that site, whether it's still there, but this was so well known earlier in the 20th century that if you got off at Shoreham Station, a taxi driver would take you to the sites. It was that well known as a celebrity plant, you could say. More common vegetated shingle plants, sea kale, very, very common along the coast here, but one of our rarities, the Charding pink, which its headquarters in Sussex is quite near East Head, on the Selsey Peninsula, on shingle at the bird reserve Pagham Harbour. And there are hundreds, sometimes thousands of plants there, but it also occurs quite near the starry clover at Shoreham. They're about the only 2 sites, I think, in Sussex. Now, I'm going to state the obvious, something which I'm very good at. Rarity can simply be a matter of the habitats you've got. And in Sussex, we don't see much alpine gentian. Moving on, one of the favourite plants I have is the heath cudweed. Now, it's not easy to find. It's a late season plant too. uh, but and it's one that's in decline, I think nationally, certainly in Sussex. And I thought I'm going to use tonight some of these distribution maps, which are out of the Flora of Sussex, published in 2018. But it gives me another chance to show you the outline of the county of Sussex. And for botanical purposes, for natural history purposes, it's divided into two. I'm sitting here in West Sussex, Vice County 13, and a lot of other people are sitting in East Sussex in Vice County 14. I've mentioned here in the caption at the top that heath cudweed is associated with coppicing, and all the large dots in West Sussex, I think, are on sites that are coppiced more or less regularly. Now, I think that I need to explain the dots to you. The large black dots are the small black dots are pre-2000 records, not refound. So records before the year 2000, not refound. These are based on tetrads, 2 by 2 kilometer squares. The large black dots are pre-2000 records, but also found during the work for the Flora of Sussex, post-2000. And the empty dots, the little circles, they are records since 2000, but not known in the tetrad before. And what you'll see if you look at the map for the heath cudweed is that there are a lot of little dots about, and a lot of little dots, particularly in East Sussex. And I think there is certainly more coppicing going on in West Sussex than East. I like distribution maps, and there are species in Sussex which have unusual distributions for ecological reasons that perhaps we don't understand. And the dark mullein is really a Western species, as you'll see from all the big dots, whether they're black dots or circles, whereas it's not very common in the East. Whereas Filipendula vulgaris, the dropwort, a downland plant, although the downs extend right to the left-hand side of that map, it's very rarely found on the Western Downs. I think some of the ecological reasons we understand for that. The Eastern Downs are much more open. They're not so well treed as the Western parts, and they're sunnier. Their aspect, it tends to be sunnier, and they're more in touch with the sea. But more than that, I cannot say. I was trying to think of a chalk downland plant in Sussex that was very rare anyway, and I came up with the meadow clary. This is only known in 2 sites near Shoreham, which is not far from Brighton. Its distribution is a little bit patchy across the southern half of England, and it's a limestone and chalk specialist, but I'm not sure really why it is so scarce. Only 2 sites, as I said, in Sussex. Moving on to a species that is not found as a native, a presumed native anyway, outside Sussex. One of our charismatic plants, one of our iconic plants, the spiked rampion, a plant of the low-wheeled hedge banks. It's another plant that actually is associated with coppicing, but you can find it on woodland edges as well. It's not a common plant in Sussex. There's the distribution. You see it's confined to East Sussex. The first Sussex record is 1824, and that's quite late for a native species, and it has been suggested that the origin of this species is from Mickle Priory, and I'll just point that in on the map where the red arrow falls. There, it has been suggested that it escaped from Mickle Priory, which was an Augustinian foundation, and would have had a hospital garden where they grew herbs for healing. Spike rampion does have medicinal properties, but the authorities are all a bit vague. And if it had escaped from Mickle Priory, I would have thought that there might have been, in any case, an earlier record from since 1825. But I would much prefer to think in my romantic way that this is a native species and one of our iconic species. Let me take you just briefly out of Surrey to the north over the county border to Thursley Common, which is one of the best bogs in southern England. Wonderful there. You can see the cotton grass and the bog asphodel. We don't have extensive wet bogs like this in Sussex. We have some, but they're nowhere near the quality of Thursley. Two of the species you'll find on Thursley Common, the white and the brown beak sedge. Well, we do have white beak sedge in Sussex, but we don't have brown beak sedge. We don't have black bog rush. They haven't got much of it in Surrey. I think what there is only on Thursley Common, but somebody from Surrey might correct me on that. But I wanted to show the black bog rush and the brown beak sedge as two examples of plants which have never been Sussex plants. It's not that we've lost them. I don't think that in historical times anyway, or historical botanical times, we've ever had the habitat to support them. It goes back to what I stating the obvious, that you need the habitat, you're going to have the plant. I think although I tend to associate these two species with Purbeck on Dorset, if you look at their national distributions, they are really rather different. And the brown beak sedge indeed is quite a rare plant. Equally, we don't have lovely bogs like these in Purbeck, where we get drosseras, including the hybrid drosseras. The largest one, the long-leaved sundew, has only got one Sussex record. It's no longer with us. 1724, somewhere inland from Hastings, the eminent Sherard found this, but it's long gone. So if you come to Sussex, don't expect bogs like that. But we do have heaths and we do have bogs. And a characteristic of our heaths here is the dwarf gorse, Ulex minor. We don't really have Ulex gallii, the western gorse, although some is naturalized in one site. And there are a few dubious old records. Our main heathlands are the lower Greensand in the west of the county. There's St Leonard's Forest, which a lot of it has been lost to development, but that has some reasonable heaths on it. But the biggest area is over the border in East Sussex, which is Ashdown Forest, which, if you're coming down to Sussex, is well worth a visit. That's the sort of heathland we get with Calluna, Ling, the Erica cinerea, and the dwarf gorse. On the damper parts, we have the cross-leaved heath, but we don't have very exotic other Erica species, I'm afraid. Erica tetralix, yes. But we do have the marsh gentian, and its stronghold, as you can see from the distribution map, is Ashdown Forest. I'm speaking from you from one of the small dots over in West Sussex, where it used to occur but hasn't been seen for a long time. It's a very particular plant. It suffers from overmanagement and undermanagement, but we're learning a lot more about it. The national distribution, and I need to tell you about this, is a BSBI map, and the empty dots are losses here. It's not the same system as the Sussex flora. You can see it's been lost from quite a few hectads. These are hectad maps, but it still occurs in Sussex and indeed down through the edge of Hampshire into Dorset and a bit in Surrey, and then again further north. But it is in decline, as you can see from all the empty circles there. There it is in decline across the country, and bring in Ruth Eastwood, who is doing research on the Ashdown forest populations into the genetics, hoping to shed some light on this. And this project is being funded partly by the BSBI. The SBRS gave a large donation, and I'm so pleased to be able to tell you that the Wildflower Society has also contributed to this very worthwhile project. Ruth, who is bringing up a couple of daughters, was at Kew, and I'm sure that she will, and she works part-time now. Right, now this has all been a little bit woolly, so I'm going to talk about the Sussex Rare Plant Register. What constitutes a rare plant? We're using the criteria that have been used by the BSBI, and we're using the tetrad. We now are recording monads, but tetrads are still quite useful. And technically speaking, we are saying that a rare plant is one that occurs in 3 or fewer tetrads. We have to treat West Sussex and East Sussex separately. So you can see there's only one large black dot in East Sussex, indicating one post-2000 record, and there are only 3 dots in West Sussex. Those of you who have noticed 4 are quite correct. There are 4, but we are rather concerned about this plant, so we are calling it rare anyway. The marsh club moss. Scarce plants, also to be dealt with in the rare plant register, occur in between 4 and 10 tetrads, and I've got an example of one here, the sand sedge, scarce in both East and West Sussex. It does actually occur, apart from on dunes, it does occur inland sparingly in West Sussex. If you're looking at the picture on the left and you're wondering who is trying to injure me with a javelin, I should point out that that's my wife's walking pole, which keeps creeping into my photograph. So apologies for that. Now, we have already published a rare plant register in Sussex in 2001, but we're currently working on an update. The 2001 one was masterminded by Mary Briggs, Alan Knapp, and Paul Harms. Mary and Alan, sadly no longer with us, but I'm sure that a lot of you in the Wildflower Society will be familiar with Paul Harms. Paul Harms was the BSBI recorder for East Sussex for 26 years, and he now, of course, leads expeditions across the globe. That picture, that's not Paul on the left, I should point out. This is Paul. as I say, he should be familiar to quite a few of you. Surrey, meanwhile, have published their rare plant register. It's a very accomplished volume, well worth look, represents an awful lot of work by our counterparts over the county. If you go on a field meeting with the Surrey Society, they're much more formal than we are in Sussex. They always dress for lunch. Right, here we are back in Sussex with the Sussex Botanical Recording Society Rare Plant Register Working Group. And I'm sure that a lot of you will notice somebody there on the left, but we've got both BSBI Vice County recorders, including Ruth, whom we featured earlier, and the lady on the right will be appearing again soon. But let me remind you of Helen Dignam on the left there, who always turns out looking very chic, I think. The red arrow is pointing at Frances Abraham, who is renowned in Sussex for her pink hat. And Frances has laid the foundations of our second edition Rare Plant Register by listing the species that we need to cover. And obviously, the first list is those that are qualify as being rare or scarce, according to how many tetrads they've been recorded in since 2000. But she's also got some runners-up, additional species that we may be included. Possibly we think they might be in decline. We have other good reasons why we want up-to-date data on them. We cover all the species that we believe to be extinct in Sussex. And finally, we cover species that aren't actually scarce or rare in Sussex, but have a national designation for being of interest. So that's what we're working on as a society at the moment. I thought I'd give you some examples of the species involved. This lovely spreading bellflower, it's classified as scarce in West and East Sussex, but I think it might well have got itself into the rare category since 2000. There's only one site in West Sussex now, as far as that it's been seen in recent years. And in fact, there has been research nationally into this species, because as you can see from the empty circles there in the BSBI atlas, there it has disappeared from an awful lot of hectads quite recently. So we'll be monitoring that. And in all, there are 367 rare or scarce species in Sussex that we're monitoring at the moment. And of course, a famous one for us is the fly honeysuckle, Nonisra xylosteum, known at Amberley in the Arun Valley in West Sussex since 1801. And I'm not sure that it's known to occur as a native or putative a native in any other county. The species that we also want to look at, but are not actually classified rare or scarce yet, we've got 45 of those, and there's a good example there, the bastard toadflax, which our friend Ted Pratt had a competition and decided that we might use a more polite name for it, stars in the grass, which I think is rather nice. I'll give you a few examples of species that aren't actually scarce or rare, but we're concerned about. And one of them is petty whin. And you can see from the dots on the left in West Sussex that we've only got a couple of or three at most sites where it's been seen since 2000. The situation in East Sussex is a little bit better on Ashdown Forest towards the north there, but there's still quite a lot of small dots indicating losses. So we're worried about that. One of the strange things about Petit Whin is it's incredibly difficult to see when it's not in flower. And it's not necessarily a small plant at all. It can almost be, it can be as large almost as a moderate gorse bush. But when it's not in flowering, it's very easy to overlook. From Genista anglica to Genista tinctoria, the Dyer's greenweed, an old meadow species, we're a bit worried about this too. If you look at our distribution map, we've got an awful lot of small dots there, and we haven't got many large dots in West Sussex either. It's meadows generally are not that common in West Sussex, old meadows anyway. A little bit more common in East Sussex, but it is definitely it has definitely declined in the last 50 years. If I draw your attention to the records around Chichester Harbour in the far west of Sussex, my wife and I were down there looking at the Dyer's greenweed a couple of years ago, and we bumped into someone who was looking at the Dyer's greenweed a little more closely than we were. So we accosted him, and he was an entomologist, and he was looking for the larval cases of this species of moth, Coleoptera vibicella. And I got this out of the resource UK moths. You'll see it's a case-bearing moth. And if you look at the lower photograph, I'm just indicating there, that is the larval case, the portable larval case of the moth. And it looks very much like the seed pod of our Genista. So I thought that was interesting. On our list too of plants that may make it into the rare plant register, we've got bristle club rush, which we don't see a lot of, a plant of rather damp, gravelly habitats. And marsh willow herb, which is definitely in decline in Sussex. Generally, I think we're drying out in Sussex, and of course, we've got problems, as have a lot of counties, lack of management. But we don't see a lot of marsh willow herb. Where we do see it is in the Amberley Wild Brooks by the River Arun, not a million miles from where I'm sitting. And this is quite a hot spot for rare plant species. There are 15 there, and 4 on our list of species which we are still we're monitoring, even though they don't qualify as rare and scarce. And there's the Wild Brooks pictured this afternoon from the hill to the west, and you can see that they're filling up nicely with water for the winter. It's the time of year when the birders are out. These two were looking for raptors, and as I took this photograph, there were 6 red kites circling overhead. It's not the time of year for botanizing on the brooks. That's what it looks like in summer. That's a rather overgrown ditch looking southwards towards the downs, and you could imagine that over the other side of the downs there's the sea. And I've just put in the side there one of the rather lovely plants of the Wild Brooks, the bog bean. Of course, you had your own meeting at Amberley Wild Brooks in 2024, and I must thank Ken for these photographs and for other photographs he lets me use very kindly. And this was a field meeting organised by your own Sue Dines and Sue Adams, and Francis of the Pink Hat was also on hand to advise them. Just to remind you of Sue Adams, she has great powers of concentration, as you can see, as indeed does dear Sue Deness. It's always a pleasure to go out with the two Susans. Neither of them lives too far away. In fact, Sue lives dangerously near, just down the road from me. And if I have a grass I can't do, I put it through her letterbox. Now, Francis of the Pink Hat has written a whole book on one of the specialities of the Wild Brooks, on cut grass. It's one of those plants that does very well in a hot summer. And in fact, it only flowers in a very hot summer. There it is flowering on the right. But when those years that the inflorescence doesn't fully exert, you can learn to spot it. That picture on the left shows this rather distinctive jaunty angle of the leaf blade. You can get very familiar with that. Francis booked, by the way, I think it costs £6 and can be requested through the Sussex Botanical Recording Society. There's going close into the inflorescence of cut grass, and you may notice a pink hat there. There's Francis with Sue on her left, and Jo Wormsley. I'm not sure whether she's a Wildflower Society member. Much missed. She's gone to the Hebrides or somewhere remote. And there, the late Richard Robinson, who was so popular in the SBRS and I think the Wildflower Society, dearly missed. There's the Sussex Botanical Recording Society flora, showing the distribution of cut grass, which follows the Arun River north of the Brooks. Another speciality of the Brooks and the Arun, a bit further north as well, is the narrow-leaved water dropwort. There's the distribution map. Again, it's focused on the Arun. It's got a couple of outliers there over on the River Ouse in East Sussex, but it's a real Arun speciality, and it times its flowering and fruiting exactly right for water meadows. It goes through its cycle nicely before the meadows are mown. The only site in West Sussex for the lesser water plantain, and that's two lovely photographs that Francis took this year of it, just in one of the ditches at Amberley Brooks. Other Amberley Wild Brooks specialities, you have to fish out of the ditch, and here is the sharp-leaved pondweed. You might just be able to spot on the lower leaf there how sharp it is, and then I managed to get a close-up of the fruits. But Amberley is, if you're going to visit Amberley, you need your grapnel. So we moved on there from some of the plants that we were concerned about, and the hotspot for rare species in Sussex, Amberley Wild Brooks. Just show you a few of the species extinct in Sussex, and the ground pine, last seen a long time ago in West Sussex, and really quite a long time ago in East Sussex. And in order to see ground pine these days, I have to go over the border into Surrey. We also haven't seen slender Secondia for a long time. It used to occur in a couple of places, Ashdown Forest and near Horsham. and St Leonard's Forest, but I think that the habitat quality in both places declined. But we'll keep an eye out for it. And the moonwort, again, not seen for a long time in Sussex. I think that's a plant that is retreating north as the climate warms. Now, what we lack in West Sussex, and to almost to the same extent in East Sussex, are unimproved meadows. But we have recently discovered one near Petworth in West Sussex, and the greater butterfly orchid in Sussex is quite scarce, but we tend to think of it as a woodland plant. Whereas I know elsewhere it is a meadow plant. Well, this is the only meadow in Sussex where I've seen it. And there was also a lot of the grass vetching, which is nice. And this is a record of an SBRS meeting in 2024. In this meadow, we just sat down for lunch and someone came along with some of this, with a bit of this sedge. And David Streeter was there, and he thought he knew what it was. I was there. I thought I knew what it was, not because I know anything like as much as David Streeter, but I've been growing it. And this is the downy fruited sedge. And it's the first record in Sussex since about 1840. In fact, the Sussex record of 1840 was doubted for a long time. Mainly by me, lovely to be proved wrong. In fact, it's very likely, although the 1840-ish record doesn't have a location, it's very likely it was very near Pulborough where this was found. So that was good news. We had to cross that off the extinct list. Sue Deness very kindly photographed the fruits, and there aren't that many sedges in Britain that have these hairy utricles. This year we also had to cross off from the extinct list the woolly thistle. Well, this is a very large plant, and you wouldn't have thought that you could miss it. The gentleman who found it, Graham Lyons on the left, is one of the county's best ecologists. He describes himself as a pan recorder. He doesn't go around recording pans. He goes around recording everything, and he's no mean botanist. And he found this on a farm, this woolly thistle on a farm, private land near Brighton. And the first and only record for Sussex was recorded by William Mitten. William Mitten was a chemist who lived in Hurstpere Point, that's over the downs north of Brighton, and he was an expert on mosses of international repute. But when Mrs. Merrifield of Brighton wanted to publish her sketch of natural history of Brighton and its vicinity in 1864, she asked William Mitten to supply a list of vascular plants for Brighton and the area, and included on that list was woolly thistle. And we've been waiting until 2025 to see it again. That's a nice story. There you go, the woolly thistle. Now, you're going to all ask for your money back because I said I would talk about what's rare in Sussex. I'm now going to say a few things about what's not rare in Sussex. These are species which have got designations nationally, but we don't think they're very rare in Sussex, although I must admit there's not much roundleaf crowfoot around. Oakleaf goosefoot is something that possibly has increased. It's usually prostrate like this, and it has a very neat leaf with a silvery underside, and dung heaps are a good place to find it. Least spurge It's not that rare on the Downs, although it used to occur in the Weald. It's very rarely now seen as an arable weed in the Weald. Corn marigold, an arable weed of light soils on the Downs and on the sand. We don't see a lot of that, but it's not actually rare yet. I think we might actually want to put that on our list too. The common cudweed is not common in Sussex, but it's not terrifically rare around here. I collected some seed, and 2 years later, it was established on my lawn beyond my wildest dreams. Arthur Hoare, long-time member of the Wildflower Society and known, I'm sure, to some people tonight. That's his photograph of green-winged orchid in a churchyard, which is a good place to find it in Sussex. Whereas autumn-bladed tress is also a bit of a churchyard plant in Sussex. Both these orchid species are not particularly rare in Sussex, although they do have national designations. The green-veined orchid is scattered around Sussex. It does occur occasionally on the Downs, more often on the central Weald around Haywards Heath Way is a good way to see it. That's right in the middle of Sussex on the London to Brighton railway line. You can also find autumn-bladed stresses in Haywards Heath, but it's more of a downland plant, and you can see quite coastal. It does like very sunny conditions. So there are two plants which have got national designations, but they're not rare or scarce in our county. We're coming to the end now. I hope we're not overrunning. And I just show you a picture of some basil leaves, and I wonder how many of you out there are shouting out the ID of this particular plant, which is, as a clue, a Sussex speciality, round-headed rampion. There's more round-headed rampion in Sussex than anywhere else. In fact, we like to think of it as a Sussex icon, and the Sussex Botanical Recording Society has its logo based on this plant. If we go to its distribution in the county, you see it's on the green. That's chalk. It's another plant that gets scarcer as you go west in Sussex, but you can see that there's an awful lot of it on the Downs, all those tetrads. National distribution, Kent, Surrey, Hampshire and Wiltshire, strangely not the Isle of Wight, but there is much more of it in Sussex than anywhere else. You can only see the two rampions growing together or painted together in central Lewis, though I'm not sure whether this hoarding has been swept away, but that was a rather nice find on a visit to East Sussex's county town. Now, have I got time, Janet, for a 2-minute story?
I'm sure, yes.
You sure?
Yeah, we're enjoying Nick.
This doesn't reflect very well on me. If you look at the right-hand picture, you may recognise Wildflower Society member Priscilla Nobbs with the green bag. I remember in that green bag on the day, she had some of her home-produced vegetables, which she handed out at lunchtime. This is an SBRS meeting in 2018 on the Downs, in more or less the middle of the range in Sussex. There was some very nice chalk grassland there, and we billed it as a special meeting for members who weren't perhaps as experienced as some of the others. And you can see there's a group there sitting on the bank having a good look. Well, a group like that, about an hour later, was sitting around this plant. and I was getting a bit impatient, to be honest. I was saying, well, they got their books out and they're looking at it. So I said, well, that you know what that is. That's Burnet saxifrage. Come with me. I'll show you something much more interesting. But they protested. It's got bracts and bracteoles. I said, oh, we don't want to worry about that. And but anyway, before the end of the day, I was getting a bit worried about these bracts and bracteoles. And in fact, my wife Elizabeth and I went back the next day and we had a good look. And of course, it wasn't Burnet saxifrage. They were quite right. They were being much more careful. This was the first record ever for great pignut in Sussex. There were about 5 plants there, but when we returned the next year, we looked a little bit further along the downs, and there were hundreds of them. And David Streeter wrote an article about it for BSBI News. It just shows you never know what's going to turn up. The great pignut has some correlation in its distribution with a genuine Sussex speciality, the moon carrot, both known in the Chilterns and both now known in Sussex. There's the moon carrot location, and there's the great pignut location. And this is the picture that I started with. This is the territory of the moon carrot. We're standing on East Head and on Seaford Head, looking out at Seven Sisters. So if you go over the cliffs there, you're in Eastbourne. And apart from being the end, this is the moon carrot, one of our special Sussex rare plants. I think that really is the end.